Okay, we are up to the final mishnah in Pirkei Avos, chapter 3. Okay, and we spent a long time in the last one, but this one is very short, and it's weird. Okay, so it says, oh no, did I just? Okay, there we go. Okay, so Rebbe Eliezer ben Chisma, which I saw someone say that it should just be Rebbe Eliezer Chisma. I don't know what it is. Says Kinin upische nida hein gufe halachos. Okay, anyone want to take a stab at translating that? Kinim, not kinim the plague. That's with the chaf. So this is from the phrase like shiluach ha ken. So bird's nest. Okay, so bird's nest, or I guess bird nest. Okay, and then pische nida. I have no idea whether this is a terminology that like made it into Nida Hilchos Nida vernacular, but I guess you'll tell me. Yeah, Lauren.
I haven't heard this before.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Is it maybe something? Is it something to do with laws of Nida or blood or?
Yeah, it does have to do with laws of
purity?
Nida. Yeah, so the literal translation is Nida openings. Okay, now there are two explanations for what this means. We're going to see them in a little while. But if that phrase looks weird, it's because there's a deliberate ambiguity that I'm trying to preserve in Pesach, in opening. Okay, so hein gufe halachos. I would translate this as they themselves are principal laws. Okay, I've seen different ways to translate this. They themselves are the corpus of the laws. They themselves are essential laws. Okay, goof means like body, literally, but means like a thing. Okay, tekufos v'gimatrios parparaos lachachma. Okay, anyone know what tekufos are?
The time period?
Okay, yeah, what kind of time periods? Oh, like, what do you mean when you say time periods?
I don't know, maybe times of the year or a certain like designated bunch of time. I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah. So the way this is, we're going to translate this for now, even though it's going to be as you can tell already, a lot of this is going to have to do with like figuring out definitions, is astronomical cycles. Okay, Tekufa is like a seasonal period in terms of the Earth's position vis-a-vis like stuff like the sun and weather and everything like that. Okay, we'll see. And gematrios, okay, and let's just say gematrios, okay, and we'll either pretend we know what that is or not, okay. Parparaos lachachma. Okay, now I kind of gave this away. I gave away one translation of this in the title of the shiur, but curious how you would translate it. I don't know if this is a term that also has some modern Hebrew usage.
Is it like the flutterings of wisdom?
Oh, you get
like
that from butterfly?
Butterfly?
Yeah.
Butterfly.
I was wondering what the relationship is, if there's any relationship between parpar and parparos. Yeah. So the dictionaries here say as follows. Okay, so I always forget about this dictionary. Ken showed me this dictionary, the Klein dictionary, which is on Spharia. It is a biblical, rabbinic, and modern Hebrew dictionary, I think. So it says parperet is a savory dish or an appetizer or a dessert or a diversion. Probably formed from parpar and literal meaning something cut to pieces or something crumbled. And then Jastro says a minor dish, salad, hash, appetizer, dessert. Okay, so I see people translate it as desserts. I see people translate it as appetizers. Okay, side dishes or condiments or seasonings for wisdom. Okay, so it's almost easier to understand what this word is not than what it is. The word means something other than the main dish. Okay, and what that is though is up for interpretation. Okay, so that is what we have here. Okay, now I know that the primary question is going to be what are the definitions, like what are the four things meaning kinim, let's just say fine. Kinim, Pirkei Nida, Tkufos, and Gematrios. Gematrios. I never know how to spell Gematrios with an aleph. Like, what are these four things? Yeah, that's going to be a major question, which we're going to just have to look straight to the Mefarshim to get answers to. But what other questions or problems are there that come to your mind aside from definition ones like that? Yeah, Tamar?
Like, what's the relationship between these two statements? It looks like a contrast, but I don't really get what the contrast is.
What is the relationship between these two statements? Okay, it looks like a contrast, but the nature of that contrast is not evident. Okay, for example, like, I guess, how could you tweak either statement to make it seem more like a contrast, like an appropriate like contrast, and like a mishlei pasuk, you know? Yeah, Lauren.
Also, like, what's the lesson, I guess, for this for chesed?
Yeah, what is the practical application? Yeah, Tamar, what were you gonna say?
Well, there's just like a lot of things that look like they don't line up to me. I mean, I guess the main thing is like halachos, gufei halachos versus parparos lochachma.
Right.
Everything that seems to be contrasted. Yeah.
So the problem here is that parparos is a like culinary analogy or like a cuisine analogy, right? So if the first half said, you know, hein like lechem ubasar, like they are the bread and meat, or they are the bread and wine, and then this other stuff is dessert, then I'd be like, okay, fine, I get what it's saying. Or if it says that these things are the gufei halachos, and these things are like, you know, halachos tfelos, like secondary halachos, then I would get that. But like, it feels like it's mixing metaphors.
Yeah, I have like a further question, I think, which is a little bit vague, but I feel like the kinin and Pirkei Nida seem to me like concrete objects that they're involved in halacha. Maybe it's the halachas of those things, but the other two seem like abstractions that wouldn't be like.
Okay, that's good.
Thing, you know. Okay,
so I'm gonna tack this on to the first question. These four things, these four, don't seem like the same types of things. Okay, bird nests, and nida openings sound like physical objects, whereas astronomical cycles and gematrios seem more like abstract phenomena. Yeah. So I guess you could also say, like, I'm going to add this. What are the pairings? Yeah. Okay. I guess we'll ask our other like standard question, which is who is the intended audience of this this mishnah? Right, like, to what extent is this for a chassid in training, and to what extent is this for everyone on their level? Yeah, Vanessa?
I don't know that we can get an answer, but why these four things particularly? Like, and I think this applies more for the first part. Like, there's a million physical halachot that are more relevant to our lives than birdness. Like, why not how to build a sukkah? Why not like other tangible things? Yeah,
right. Why specify these four things? Now, I think part of the answer is going to come from another question, which I think we need to ask, which is like, what is the hava amina? Right? Like, what would we have thought if Rabbi Eliezer ben Chisma didn't say this? And I think there are like a lot of directions, right? Like, you might think that, well, okay, what would you say the havamina of this mishnah is, or the clauses in the mishnah? What would we have thought if he didn't tell us this? I don't think it's one answer. I think like there's a couple of directions. Yeah, Vanessa?
I don't know if this is like my gut answer, but maybe that like Torah is Torah. No matter what you learn, it's all important.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, right. So meaning maybe the very fact that he's making distinctions is the chiddush. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, actually, let me compare this. Where's the havamina? and what is the chiddush? Yeah. So one thing is maybe you would not even have these categories, and he's showing these categories. Okay, good. What's another direction you could take? Like, let's say you have these categories. Yeah, Tamar.
So this is really vague, but like maybe instead of gufei halachos, it's some other part of halacha. Like, I don't know, it's a detail of another halacha or something.
Okay.
I'm not sure, you know.
Okay, right. So another. Oh, yes, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was gonna say same thing for parparos the chachma. Like maybe you would think this is a main chachma, and instead
Okay.
it's a side dish, you know.
Okay, right.
Like
So one possibility is that you might, the reason why I has to tell you that these things are the gufei halachos is because you might think that they're not gufei halachos, and the reason why he has to tell you that tekufas and gematrias are parparos for chachma is you might think that there's something else, so you might miscategorize them, and for all we know, maybe you might swap them. Maybe you would think that the kinim and Pirkei Nida are parparos and the tekufas and gematrias are gufei halachos, so it's really difficult to tell like who he's speaking to, like what their preconceived notion is. Okay, so I think the best way to go about this is to just start getting definitions. So the plan for tonight is there are 3 mefarshim that presented themselves to me as being like something we could work with. The first one is the most clear in terms of the definition he gives, but the least clear in spelling out the idea. So we're gonna have to like work on that. That's the Ovadia mברטנורא. The second one is the Meiri, who gives a beautifully clear explanation that we can develop a lot, and I have no idea where it's going to take us. Okay, and then the third one is the Spforno, who is making a point that seems to be really worth talking about on its own. And I also don't know where it's going to go in terms of Pirkei Avos. Okay, that's the plan. Okay, so let's start with, and I translated all of them ahead of time. Okay, Ovadia mברטנורא says like this. He says, Korbanos ha'of kurin kiyim. So the sacrifices of birds. Oh, actually, sorry, I did not translate this. I copied and pasted this from English translation, so I don't know if this is a good translation. I forgot that I did that. That I had to go back and retranslate it. So he says sacrifices of fowl are called nest. Lashon kan tzipor, referring to the nest of a bird. Okay, so like in the time of the Beis Mikdash, they would bring 2 species of birds, doves and turtle doves. V'yesh behen halachos chamuros, and there are within it stringent halachos. Okay, now by the way, actually I should have brought this up here. Okay, so kinim is the name of a masechta, one of the tractates. Okay, so I'll show you where it is. This is going to be relevant. Okay, so just quick overview of Shas. Okay, Shas stands for Shisha Sadarim, the 6 orders of Mishnah. So there's Zraim, which deals with agricultural stuff, Moed, which deals with holidays, Nashim, which deals with marriage and divorce, or things pertaining to like relationships involving women. Nezikin is torts, damages, court cases. Kachim is sanctified things, so a lot of korbanos stuff and Beis Mikdash stuff. And then taharos is means purities, which is a lot of stuff about tuma and tahara. Okay, so in kachim you have kinim, which is bird's nest. Okay, and it refers there to, like you said, the korbanos for birds, of birds, involving birds. So he says, and there are within the tractate stringent halachos, such as imnis arvu chova benadava, if an obligatory offering got combined with a free will offering, o ola shema'aseh lamala b'chatas shema'aseh lamata, or an ola that you have to do the action upwards and the chatas, which is downwards. Okay, now I don't know anything about this stuff. What I'm imagining is, let's say I'm walking with my dove that is going to be used for a chatas, okay, and I trip and fall, and the dove falls into a whole pile of stuff that's used for voluntary offerings, okay, or the bird flies away and like it mixes it up. Okay, I don't even know what these things are. Apparently, though, there are a lot of complicated halachos there, and it seems like they involve mixtures. Okay, fine. So set that aside for a second. Okay, Pirkei Nida. Now I'm going to tell you the minority opinion, and then all the interpretations we're doing tonight are the majority opinion. So Rabbeinu Yonah says Pirkei Nida means like the openings from which blood comes from that will have a different status in halacha, right? So depending on where the blood comes from in the anatomy, then and what the cause is, then it'll produce a different status in nida. So that's the minority opinion. I didn't really find anyone who really explained why that's relevant here, but everyone else says as follows: Pirkei nida is hilchos nida she'ibda vista, that the laws of nida of a woman who loses track of her cycle. And she needs to watch until she gets back to the Pesach, until the starting time. And this, again, I don't really know the intricacies of Hilchos Nida, so I don't know if this is as crazy as it sounds. That apparently, according to the opinion that says that immersing in a mikvah at its on time is a mitzvah, she'll need to do 95 immersions, I guess, to cover her bases. Okay. My understanding is that we don't hold that way, right? I mean, in the sense that if you never do tefillah in a mikvah, then you're just in a state of tumah, but there's no, I mean, okay. There's no, I've never heard of a woman who has gone 70 or 95 times to try to get rid of the suffix and get it on time. I've just never heard of that, so I assume we don't hold by that opinion. I mean, you guys know more about this than I do. Any is it sounding familiar? Anything about 95 times that you heard of before?
No, I never heard of it.
Okay, all right, good. All right, good. So we're in the same boat. Okay, fine. Okay, so that's Pirkei nida. Okay, hein gufe halachos. Iker torshabal peh shemekablim aleha sachar. They are the essence of torshabal peh that you receive reward for. Now that's a pretty astonishing statement. Okay, that these bird's nests and nida openings are the essence of torshabal peh. Okay, and that's what Vanessa was saying. Why don't you pick something else in torshabal peh, like Hilchos Shabbos? That seems to me, to be pretty basic torshabal peh. Okay, fine. Okay, then he goes on and he says, Tkufos is inyan mahalach hamazalos. He says it's the trajectory of the constellations. Okay, how the constellations are vis-a-vis Earth and the motion of them. Gematrios is what we mean by gematria, cheshbon osios, calculation of the numerical value of the letters. And they are parparos lachachma, kamo haparparaos, shiragilin le'echol besofa seuda, likinuach derech ta'anug. Just like the desserts that people are accustomed to eat at the end of the meal as a palate cleanser for enjoyment, so too these wisdoms, meaning the constellations and the gematrios, bring honor to those who possess them in the eyes of people. Okay, so the essence here, other than the definitions, is he's saying that the bird korbanos and nida openings are the essence of torshabal peh. Okay, I added in the word of the essence because I don't think you could say that they are the essence. That would just be a crazy statement. And then he's saying that tekuvos and gematrios are desserts because they bring honor, just like I guess you get enjoyment out of eating dessert. These things bring a different kind of enjoyment, which is honor in the eyes of people. So what do you think about that? I don't have any idea for this, by the way. So this is something we have to work out if we're going to find any ideas. Yes, Mar?
I just think it's kind of an interesting thing. Why would Pirkei Avos be concerned with what brings you honor in the eyes of people?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well, right? Aren't we past this? Isn't a chassid past this? Yeah, Lauren?
I don't know if this is a stretch about what I'm saying, that maybe what he's saying, but I'm wondering if maybe he's talking about different ways to relate to learning.
Okay.
Maybe the first two are kind of talking about very detailed torshabal peh. You could kind of get very involved in the details of halacha and every single nuance and intricacy, and that's kind of and all that is very important, and that constitutes your fulfillment of the mitzvah. But then maybe talking about tekufos and gematrios, that brings honor to them in certain sense. That if you can get deeper meanings from that, maybe that's referring to more analytical learning, or I don't know. Maybe I'm just totally.
Okay, no, I hear you.
This could be stretching, and I don't know if that's really what he's saying, but
okay, no, that's more than I have. Okay, it's talking about two different motives for learning and giving examples that highlight the I guess the not the pinnacle, the furthest reaches of those areas, meaning like the person who's involved in like the really, really nitty-gritties of these difficult areas of halacha. That's another thing also. The Uvadi Mbartan doesn't say this by both of them, but someone else said Rabbeinu Yonah, actually, I think, who I deleted. Whoops. I think Rabbeinu Yonah says that these are very complicated areas of halacha, both of them. So that's like the person who's like into the Torah path for the reward of the Torah path, and then there's all this like more flashy. I didn't say flashy, but like I don't know how you want to characterize these two groups.
Yeah, I was thinking about like ideas. Like I don't know. I guess I'm thinking about gematria because I guess I'm biased because I'm thinking of my Fader's book with gematria, but that he gets really deep ideas from the gematria, like uses the number to develop this idea about how to live your life, let's say, and how to impact it. So that's kind of what I was thinking about. Like, you're kind of like taking a broader approach, and that which is dessert because it's not like day to day. I mean, it could be day to day, but it's more about like ideas that influence you versus let's say the halacha, which is like more practical because you need to actually do it.
Okay, so that's actually, I think you're bringing out a new quality here, which we did not talk about, which is that dessert, if you translate parparos as desserts, that is not something that is a mainstay. That's something that you don't have to have it. You can have it occasionally, whereas gufe halachos sound like the main thing. So it could be that that's the pairing, that this is talking about like the, I don't know why it's expressing the second part in mushal and the first part not in mushal, but it could be talking about how the first these subjects like bird's nest and nida, even though they seem very remote and complex, that's like the main part of your learning diet. Whereas this other stuff might also be complex, but that's like a bonus, for enjoyment and for kavod. I saw Vanessa's hand first. Yeah, Vanessa.
I'm wondering if it's not just that it's extra, but like once you have I feel like it's saying that there's foundational halachot and then there's like extraneous ones, and like even though they're all important and count. Sorry, my WhatsApp is going nuts. Like some random person learning Kabbalah doesn't achieve anything, but when you have someone who's like already really rooted in like the halachot, like mentioned in the first part, like the nest and whatever.
Yeah.
That level of insight in Torah allow you to like bring out what's actually important about Kabbalah or gematria or whatever you're learning. I'm not writing this the way I thought I was.
I feel like I'm missing. I feel like I'm missing your approach. Are you?
Me too.
Okay. All right. Think about it, and you can always state it again. Yeah, Tamar.
Do we have like a working definition for the reward?
No. I mean, I guess there is a I broadly speaking, okay, then learning can the reward is the essential reward of learning is the perfection of your mind and gaining the knowledge. When you're learning halacha, there's also the reward of knowing what to do. And I guess those are the two principal rewards. But I don't know what he's referring to specifically here. Okay, so here's what I'm going to suggest. Okay, because the next two Mefarshim are so much more involved and they do say ideas, let's leave this aside. I just want to show it to you because this was the first commentary I found who defined all the four things. Okay, but now let's go to the Meiri. The Meiri gives us a nice idea that we're going to have a lot to talk about here. Okay, so he says like this. He says, Zeha Chacham kivin lahadri ha'adam b'limudo. This sage intended to guide a person in his learning, like certain sages did, who composed like chapters or pamphlets of instruction for someone who is educating himself. That you should start with this particular area of Chachma, and you should read this book. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, my edition of the Meiri doesn't have this abbreviation. I forgot what the abbreviation is. I'll Seder HaChachmos. Same thing in the order of the of these branches of wisdom. V'remez or v'ramas derech ktsara she'ein roy lo likanas b'chachmos hativios v'ha'elokios ad shiamali kreso basar v'yayin. And he's alluding to the fact, he's hinting at the fact that it is not proper to enter into the sciences of nature and the divine sciences, meaning physics and metaphysics, until a person has filled his belly with meat and wine. Ratzalomar chachmas Torah v'hatalmud, meaning the wisdom of Torah and Talmud. V'tavas bezeh kinin upischei nida shehem achrone hasadarim echad b'seder kachim v'echad b'seder taharos. Okay, he chose bird's nest and nida openings, which are at the ends of the orders of Mishnah. One at the end of the order of Kachim, the other at the end of the order of Taharos. Lomar lo, as if to say, Sheroy lo sheyilmo tzchila kol hatalmud ilu amar mitchila ve'etzof. It's as if he's saying you should learn the entire Talmud, as if he said from beginning to end. The inyan. Okay, then he defines kinim. He says vinyan kinim hu korbanos ha'of. Those are the bird offerings for him. Inyanim mivubalim. They're confusing topics. Upischei nida and openings of nida him inyanim nida she'avda vista shetzricha she'tishmor ad she'tachzu lefischa. So that's what we said before. Pischei nida is if she loses track of her cycle and she has to wait till it starts again. V'him devarim temuhim u'mivubalim. They are things that are astonishing and confusing laws. Okay, so let's just stop, and I just want to show you what he's doing here. Okay, this is like watching a real surgeon at work. Okay. So what he did was he asked the same question we did, which is what are kinim and pischei nida, like what is that category? So he looked at Shas and said, oh, okay, so you got to understand, by the way, in terms of the orders of Shas that have been learned throughout history, Zra'im is learned because of Maseches Brachos, which is where almost all of our laws of Brachos and Tefillah come from. Moed is holidays, that's definitely learned. Nashim is, Ksuba, marriage, divorce, law, vows, that's definitely learned. And Nezikin deals with like tort law, which is also learned. Okay, Kachim and Taros are rarely learned. Okay, the only part of Kachim that is learned, typically nowadays is Hulin, because part of Hulin deals with Shrita and Kisui Hadam, and then part of Taros is Nida, which is relevant nowadays. Okay, but for most of history, most of like the last 2,000 years, since we don't have a Beis Mikdash, then Kachim and Taros were virtually ignored. Rav Chaim Soloveitchik was one of the ones who pioneered introducing Kachim and Taros back into the yeshiva curriculum of like studying these areas. But for most people, it's like the obscure, like back rooms of Talmud. Okay, so what the Meiri is doing is he's saying Kachim ends with Kinim, and I guess maybe these things about mixing up the bird's nest are at the very end. Okay, I'm not really sure because I haven't learned Kinim. And then Taharos, the Meiri says that Nida is at the end of Taharos. In our ordering, if he had a different order then. So what he's doing basically is he's saying, what does it mean when it says bird's nest and Nida openings? He's saying that basically, like the way we say like from A to Z, okay, from Brachos all the way to Kinim and Pischei Nida, it means all of Shas. Okay, that's one thing that he's doing. And he's saying that it's Gufei Halachos, which means that it is, that constitutes all of Talmud, and you need to learn all of Talmud. Okay. Next, Tekuvos and Gematrios. Did he not explain that? Or did I just temporarily forget? Huh. Interesting. Okay. I think what he's doing, I get it now. So he's saying Tekuvos and Gematrios. It sounds like he's saying that is the natural sciences. Okay, Tekuvos I can see because Tekuvos is astronomy. Okay, I'm not sure what he held gematrios were, but it does not seem like he holds that gematrios is numerical value of letters. Okay, it sounds like because gematria is obviously related to the word geometry. Whatever, I don't know, is it Greek or Latin. So my guess is that he's lumping that in with like the sciences. I'm not really sure. I'm going to speculate in a little while. And then here's the other brilliant move. Okay, we actually mistranslated this, and I didn't even notice this until just now. It's not parparos le chochma, it's parparos la chochma, for the wisdom. And that's what he means when he says that it's alluding to the wisdom, which is metaphysics, which is knowledge of God, which is the highest level. So he holds that this whole Mishnah and Pirkei Avos is outlining what we call like a Seder Halimud, a curriculum, where he's saying first you have to master all of the Talmud. Then you go and you do the natural sciences, physics, and then you do metaphysics. And that's the order that you should go in. Okay. Any questions just about the facts here? Yeah, Vanessa?
It might not be about the facts, but what's the Havamina then of his
Okay.
understanding?
Yeah. So
Okay.
before we understand the Havamina, I want to just delve a little bit more into like the way he's thinking, because I don't want to sound like a stuffy academic here, but he is thinking in a very like medieval way. Okay. What do you guys know about the medieval curriculum of liberal arts? Kind of a obscure topic. Yeah, Lauren?
I don't know. Was it nothing? Not nothing, but very religious. I'm thinking of Christianity, but I don't know.
Okay. So there were a lot of Christians who pioneered it. But let's start off with what does what we use the term all the time now, like a liberal arts education. But what is the idea of liberal arts education? Like, what does liberal arts mean? What's liberal about it?
Is it well-rounded or like?
Okay, yeah, that is definitely the idea. But where is the liberal is from the word liberty or liberation, and it does have to do with being well-rounded.
It stuff that would allow you to function and live a liberal, like independent life.
100
or to develop your own
is that it would allow you to have a liberal mind, which is to have a mind that can think in any area. Okay, that's how I would explain it, is the liberal education. But better than my explanation is I posted the Mishnah in the chat. I don't know if you can see it. Okay, yeah. Okay, so let me read from Wikipedia here. Okay, so Wikipedia, liberal arts education. We're not going to read the whole thing. Liberal arts education, from Latin liberalis, free, and ars, art or principled practice, is the traditional academic course in Western higher education. Liberal arts takes the term art in the sense of a learned skill rather than specifically the fine arts, because we think of art as like arts and crafts, but art is like a skill. Liberal arts education can refer to studies in a liberal arts degree course or to a university education more generally. Such a course of study contrasts with those that are principally vocational, professional, or technical, as well as religiously based courses. So you could study the liberal arts or the vocational arts, or like, I guess, religious studies. Okay, so there were the term liberal arts for an educational curriculum dates back to classical antiquity in the West, but has changed its meaning considerably, mostly expanding it. The 7 subjects in the ancient and medieval meaning came to be divided into the trivium and the quadrivium. The trivium was rhetoric, grammar, and logic. The quadrivium is astronomy, arithmetic, geometry, and music. Okay, the modern sense of the term usually covers all the natural sciences, formal sciences, social sciences, arts, and humanities. Okay, so what we're gonna like do a brief overview of, this is like the forerunner to the college education model that we have now. But our college education model is so divorced from like the original idea that it's almost like irrelevant. Okay, so what do you think the actually, I'm just gonna walk you through this. Okay, so the trivium is grammar, rhetoric, and logic. So grammar, this is still from Wikipedia, says teaches the mechanics of the language to the student. This is the step where the student comes to terms, defining objects and information perceived by the 5 senses. Okay, logic is the mechanics of thought and analysis, the process of composing sound arguments and identifying fallacious arguments and statements so systematically removing contradictions, thereby producing factual knowledge that can be trusted. And then rhetoric is the application of language in order to instruct and to persuade the listener and the reader. It is the knowledge, grammar, now understood, logic, and being transmitted outwards as wisdom, rhetoric. Okay, so basically like what we would call the trivium is like how to, like the pure arts of how to think. Okay, language, logic, and rhetoric. Okay, so that's what you would do first. Okay, then you have the quadrivium. Now, this is where I want you to guess here. Okay, astronomy, arithmetic, geometry, and music. I feel like when you read those 4, it's not absolutely intuitive why those 4 would go together. But can anyone attempt to articulate like what exactly is it with those 4 things? Like what makes those 4 paired together, and especially as like being part of the liberal arts? Like I would say, biology, right? Like, but that's not in there. Yeah, Tamar?
I think these are things that are pretty based on like abstract principles.
Right.
But you have to kind of keep it organized to understand it.
Okay, good. Yeah, Vanessa?
I mean, yeah, you said the biology, and that threw me off for a second, but like biology is more things you can see and touch, like are more tangible, whereas these are more, they expand your mind and still do the other stuff that the liberal arts do, and like you still have to think and grow and like think in patterns, but it's patterned, right? Like music is based on like mathematical principles, the same with astronomy to an extent, and whatever.
Okay, good. All right, so that's related to what Tamar was saying as well, that it is not like empirical stuff, it's abstract stuff. Okay, so here is what Wikipedia said. So I think the two that kind of throws off, arithmetic and geometry, we still pair to this day. Okay, astronomy we think of, I think, as a branch of the natural sciences, of like making observations with telescopes and like figuring out how like stars and planets work. So it doesn't seem to be related. And then music, we think of as one of the fine arts. Okay, but what I'm about to read is how they thought of it. Okay, quadrivium. Yeah, so the quadrivium, Latin for the four ways, and its use for the four subjects have been attributed to Boethius, who likely coined the term. It is considered the foundation of the study of philosophy, sometimes called the liberal art par excellence in theology. The quadrivium was the upper division of medieval educational provision in the liberal arts, which comprised of arithmetic, number in the abstract, geometry, number in space, music, number in time, and astronomy, number in space and time. I think that's cool. I don't know why. Okay, but it's basically like math in its four forms. Okay, pure abstraction in space, in time, and then in space and time. And that's a very, very far cry of what we do with astronomy. Back then, I mean, remember, they thought that the heavenly bodies were made of a fifth element and were perfect and went in perfect motion. And so and they had no way of like accessing it, and they didn't have no way of knowing like what the things in space were composed of. So for them, it really was a branch of mathematics. It was studying like perfect motion, in the heavens. And music was both related to rhythm, but also, I don't know why it doesn't say this, but harmony. They recognize that there are harmonies produced through ratios, and you have strings, and like if you stop the string here and you pluck it, it makes a sound, and if you stop it halfway there, it makes another sound. And if it's a certain ratio, then they combine together to make consonant harmony, and if not, they make dissonant harmony. So harmonics were also a branch of mathematics. Okay, so that is the quadrivium. Okay, and together these are called the liberal arts, or the term that Chazal have for them is called the preparatory sciences or chachmos. Okay, so any questions about that so far? We're gonna go a couple more layers before we go back to the Mishnah. Okay, so because we have our resident PhD in math, I'm going to put you on the spot tomorrow and ask a question that I'm sure you've been asked before and written about. Okay, why should people study math? What's the benefit? And let's try to answer it in terms of like what, why should everyone study math, and like how is this something that is good for like a liberal arts education in terms of like training your mind? I know you can say a lot on it, but like, what would you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's one of the ways that the human mind works, and sometimes it's important to be able to process things in this kind of way.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's like different reasons. You have to be like math has a lot of things, right? Like,
right. It's
important to study statistics so that when someone brings up a statistic, you know how to interpret it. Like that's maybe its own thing. But if you're trying to do it in this framework, I guess, like, I think that mathematical thinking is reflecting one of the mechanisms of the human mind, and it's good to have it like somewhat developed.
Okay. All right. So this is exactly why I asked you, because I wasn't sure what kind of answer you're going to give, and that's a different kind of answer than I expected. But like, can I push you one step further and say, why is it important to develop this way that the mind thinks? Are you saying that it's important intrinsically, or are you saying that it's important for other things, or both?
I mean, like you could argue, I mean, just like, you could start having a philosophical conversation about like, is it good to have your mind developed in various ways? So I would say like, maybe, yeah, if you value that. But also I think like there are aspects of the world that work this way, or that you can only understand if you think this way.
Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I think what I'm about to read is going to overlap with a lot of what you're saying. I'm going to read an excerpt. Okay, here's our here's the part in our programming when we get to the book commercial. And this is the first time, not the first time. I don't know. I don't usually I'm not even recommending this. I don't usually talk about books that I have never read. How can I? Oh, here's the cursor. I'm just trying to unblur my screen for 1 second here. Okay, so Mortimer Adler, who I read lots of books of, wrote this book called The Paideia Proposal, an educational syllabus. Okay, so in addition to like writing books on every subject and on every idea, Mortimer Adler also designed, and in addition to reorganizing the encyclopedia and how we approach knowledge, Mortimer Adler also like designed curricula. So in this book, he basically sets out an idea for a curriculum for like reforming education. I haven't read it, but when I did this Meiri, I was thinking, oh, I think I remember in the table of contents, he like explains each part of his curriculum. I wonder what he says about math. So it turns out that each chapter about each subject is written by a different person. This is written by someone named Charles Van Doren. Now I forgot, the only thing I remember about Charles Van Doren is I picture him as Voldemort because there's a movie about him. He was some like famous academic. There's a movie about him, and he's played by Ray Fiennes, who plays Voldemort. So I can only like picture Voldemort in my mind. So I want to read to you his chapter, his answer to this question about why you should learn math. But as I read it, apply it, like imagine it being applied to grammar, logic, rhetoric, astronomy, arithmetic, geometry, and music. Okay, so he's just talking about math because he's using modern categories. Okay, and I thought that this was a beautiful thing. Like, I feel like if any kid who is intellectually honest but bothered by studying math, like said, this is useless, I think this is like a very articulate answer. Okay, and it's not super long, but I want to read the whole thing. So here's what he says. The study of the exact sciences one more thing also. Think about how this is useful in Judaism, okay? Because ultimately, remember, we're talking about learning about God, okay? Which is the highest level of knowledge that we have. The study of the exact sciences in general, and in particular of the mathematics on which they are increasingly based, supplies the mind with certain nutrients. Other disciplines, such as languages, literature, or history, do not provide these same nutrients, at least to the same degree. They provide other nutrients that the exact sciences, just because they are exact, do not provide. Raw experience does not provide these nutrients at all. This muscle of the nutrients is similar to what Tamara was saying. It's like there's a part of the mind that can only be developed with this kind of thinking, and you can't get it from anywhere else. Okay, but now he's going to talk about it. The nutrients supplied by the study of mathematics consist of certain properties that give mathematics its essential character. As these properties are encountered by students, understood through the solution of concrete problems, and ultimately felt as a kind of intellectual presence, young minds enlarge and experience a higher degree of freedom. This process was described by Plato long ago. Among the properties of mathematics that enable it to have this effect of the mind are order, rigor, logical development from simple to complex, exactness, universality, abstraction, economy, and elegance, in parentheses, symmetry, diversity, rhythm, balance. To these general properties, we can add certain operational tools that are most beautifully employed in mathematics, but that are also applicable to systematic thought in general. Among these tools are the idea of symbol, of function, of transformation, and the fundamental idea of proof. An educated person should understand the nature of a mathematical proof and the difference between a mathematical proof and a proof beyond a reasonable doubt, as in a court of law. This distinction is crucial for understanding many other things that are important in the world today. Behind the idea of mathematical proof lies the even more basic idea of an axiomatic system. A mathematical proof is characterized by the fact that a conclusion follows from the premises or assumptions. In an axiomatic, we may assume whatever we please as long as our assumptions do not contradict one another, but we are then restricted by the laws of thought to certain conclusions. Any other conclusions are illegitimate. It is perhaps this characteristic of legitimacy that underlies the great satisfactions to be derived from mathematics. Many students speak of the intense pleasure that is gained from the certainty of mathematical results. In most things that we study, as well as in life itself, there are no certainties. An answer to a mathematical question, however, the solution of a mathematical problem, is either right or wrong, period. Furthermore, to the extent that a problem has roots in reality, reality has thus been ordered, understood, controlled. It gives human beings great pleasure to do this, as it should, for it is one of the fundamentally human things to do. I think it's the last paragraph here. Beyond all this, an aesthetic satisfaction derives from using the mind successfully in a field from which vagueness, inexactness, subjectivity, and emotion are banished. The experience parallels that produced by reading a play of Shakespeare's or contemplating a painting by Botticelli. The latter example is particularly apt. Mathematics, in its dealings with the world, isolates certain elements, the assumptions, and arranges and rearranges them in order to produce an ordered and coherent whole that both makes independent sense and throws light upon the world of which it is, in some sense, an imitation. Is that not what Botticelli did too? Okay. First of all, Tamara, curious what your thoughts are, and then I'm curious what everyone else thinks.
I think this is really nice. I don't know how it reads to other people, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. I as someone who I was a straight A math student, but I never liked math. And this was I was like, oh, I see why people like math, Any other thoughts that people had or observations or questions?
I feel like he described why I always liked sciences better than, let's say, English, because the right or wrong thing really spoke to me.
Okay, good. There you go. And I think you're right to say sciences, because in the days of the Meiri and certainly Plato, science was very speculative. But now the math and the sciences are much, much closer together. So a lot of the properties that he's describing in math, we get through science now, even though science is empirical. Okay, so can you see, I assume the answer is yes, how training in math would prepare a person for embarking on the study of God, okay? And certainly on the study of the natural world, okay? And if you pair that with, let's go back to our list, pair that and the training in math of exactitude with the study of grammar, of the proper use of language, and then logic, of training your mind in the rigors of following arguments, and then in rhetoric, so you can see how to persuade others or how you can, be persuaded. If you do this, this is why the Rishonim call it the preparatory sciences, because this really prepares you to embark on the real study of knowledge of God. Yeah, Vanessa? I'm listening, by the way, I just gotta get water, but I can hear you.
Yep, I wasn't sure if you were asking a question or being rhetorical, but this remind me of the first chapter of Chovot HaLevavot, which I think some people find it controversial, but this is reminding me of that. He's using the same the way he goes through all his different quote unquote proofs of how to achieve an understanding of the oneness of God, is the same way that I learned BC Calc and the different ways of going through it. So he was listen, this has to be true, right? So what has to be true? That's true. This was high school. I don't remember details, but it's the same thing of you're looking at the order and elegance of the universe and seeing that it's structured and being okay, what can we assume? Going back and not just assume, but how can we prove that assumption? You can't. It is axiomatic and so on, whatever.
Definitely. And by the way, in terms of medieval philosophy, you look at Rabbeinu Bachya and Pakuda, like you mentioned, you look at the Rambam and the more Nevuchim, you look at Thomas Aquinas, you look at the Muslim philosophers, their philosophical arguments were in the form of quasi-mathematical proofs. That was the style back then. That style has kind of fallen out of favor now. So I still think it could be useful, but for then it was in the same way as math is the language of physics for us. Analogously, mathematical style proofs were the language of rigorous metaphysics for them, so it was very, very important. Okay, one more thing, and then we can go back to the Meiri, which is the Rambam. Now, I feel like I've read this before. I don't know if it was in this year or in another year. So in the More Nevuchim, in 134, he starts off the chapter by saying there are 5. Actually, I got a PSA here. This is the Friedlander translation, aka the inferior one. Okay, so this is this is the public domain translation, and I just did not have time to scan and retype the good translation, which is the Shlomo Pines one. Okay, so I don't know if there are mistakes here. So he says like this: there are 5 reasons why instruction should not begin with metaphysics, but should at first be restricted to pointing out what is fitted for notice and what may be made manifest to the multitude. So this chapter basically goes through why you should not start off with metaphysics. And again, metaphysics is the study of God and angels and the soul and Olam Haba and all the non-physical stuff. Okay, so he has 5 reasons. We're just going to read excerpts from the 3rd reason. The 3rd reason is the preparatory studies, there's that term again, are of a long duration and man, in his natural desire to reach the goal, finds them frequently too wearisome and does not wish to be troubled by them. Okay, so basically, all these preparatory studies of the trivium and the quadrivium and Shas, finishing Shas, people don't want to do that, okay, because it's too long. So then he says like this, I love this part, be convinced that if a man were to able to reach, not yet. Be convinced that if man were to able to reach the end without preparatory studies, such studies would not be preparatory, but tiresome and utterly superfluous. In other words, he's saying the reason why we call these, like imagine, okay, I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I assume that they call it pre-calculus because you somehow need it for calculus. So if you didn't need it for calculus, then they wouldn't call it pre-calculus and you could just go straight to calculus, you know? So like, it's a prerequisite for a reason. Okay, so now here's the part I like. Suppose you awaken any person, even the most simple, as if from sleep, and you say to him, do you not desire to know what the heavens are? What is their number and their form? What beings are contained in them? What the angels are? How the creation of the whole world took place? What is its purpose? And what is the relation of the various parts to each other? What is the nature of the soul? How it enters the body? Whether it has an independent existence? And if so, how it can exist independently of the body? And by what means, to what purpose? And similar problems. He would undoubtedly say yes, and show a natural desire for the true knowledge of these things. But he will wish to satisfy the desire to attain to that knowledge by listening to a few words from you. Right? He'll say, like, tell me in a soundbite, tell me in one sentence. I'll regal achas. Ask him to interrupt his usual pursuits for a week till he learn all this. He would not do it and would be satisfied and contented with imaginary and misleading notions. He would refuse to believe that there is anything which requires preparatory studies and persevering research. Okay. And my example of this, like in high school, teaching high school, is like, you know, sometimes students will ask like profound questions, you know, and I, of course, have to give them like, you know, I'll regal achas 4-sentence answers. But if I told a student, I was like, oh, you know what? You want to know the answer to that? Stay after school with me for a week, okay? For a couple hours after school. And like, we need to go through a bunch of Gemaras. He'd be like, no, thanks, you know? And even the students who say, okay, I'll do it. If I said, okay, we'll take up this question, but learn in yeshiva for 7 years first, okay? And then we'll take it up. He would say no, you know? So people just don't want to go through the preparatory studies. Okay, so the Rambam goes on. Again, I'm just paraphrasing for our purposes here. There are also many subjects of speculation. Okay, speculation was the word for philosophy back then, which, though not preparing the way for metaphysics, help to train the reasoning power, enabling it to understand the nature of a proof and to test truth by characteristics essential to it. That's like what Charles Van Doren was saying. They remove the confusion arising in the minds of most thinkers who confound accidental with essential properties, and likewise the wrong opinions resulting therefrom. We may add, again, this has to do with exact student thinking. We may add that although they do not form the basis for metaphysical research, they assist in forming a correct notion of these things and are certainly useful in many other things connected with that discipline. Consequently, he who wishes to attain to human perfection must therefore first study logic, next the various branches of mathematics in their proper order, then physics, and lastly metaphysics. Okay, so it's very interesting. Both he and the liberal arts Wikipedia page and the Meiri prescribe an order of preparatory studies, but they're slightly different, right? The Meiri says you do Shas, then you do the natural sciences, and then you do metaphysics. Rambam says logic, then math, then physics, then metaphysics. And the quadrivium has the 7. The trivium and the quadrivium has the 7. So, you know, everyone though agrees that there are preparatory studies. Okay. We find that many who have advanced to a certain point in the study of these disciplines have become weary and stop. That others who are endowed with sufficient capacity are interrupted in their studies by death, which surprises them while engaged with the preliminary course. All right, you think you're taking pre-calc? Guess what? Surprise! Death. Okay, I know that's not funny, but I just surprises them. Yeah. All right. Anyway, there is still another urgent reason why preliminary discipline should be studied and understood. During the study, many doubts present themselves, and the difficulties or the objections raised against certain assertions are soon understood, just as the demolition of a building is easier than its erection. While, on the other hand, it is impossible to prove an assertion or to remove any doubts without having recourse to several propositions taken from these preliminary studies. In other words, you can also get certain premises from these studies that, when you apply it to metaphysics, will remove certain doubts. He who approaches metaphysical problems without proper preparation is like a person who journeys towards a certain place, and on the road falls into a deep pit, out of which he cannot rise, and he must perish there. If he had not gone forth, but had remained at home, it would have been better for him. Okay, so just as an example of this, of the quadrivium, sorry, of the 7 liberal arts, or of these things, the one I'm most familiar with is rhetoric, because I taught AP language, which is a rhetoric course. And I can tell you, like, if you don't study, and I'm not an expert rhetorician, but I've, at least taught the course a couple of years. If you aren't aware of like rhetoric, you can so be taken in by bad arguments and not even realize it, and that's what happens to like a lot of college students. Is nowadays college students don't study logic and grammar and rhetoric, and so they're just like hoodwinked or duped by bad arguments and don't even realize that they're being manipulated. They don't study fallacies, they don't study cognitive biases. So like I can see within my area of preliminary study of expertise that like this is necessary, and like I'm sure for others it's the other ones is necessary as well. Okay, any questions on this Rambam? And if not, then we'll go back to the Meiri. Okay, so now the question is, according to the Meiri, what is can we answer the questions on our mishnah? In fact, I'm going to copy and paste the questions into the chat so that we can stay on the Meiri here. Okay, so question number 1, defining the terms. He does define them, right? Why these 4 things? What are the pairings? So bird's nest and nida openings are just a fancy way of saying learn all of Shas from A to Z, and these 2 are the Z. Okay, but he really means all of Shas. So those 2 pair, and the reason why he chose those 2 is because those are the ends of the most obscure Masechtas. So like go all the way to the end. All right, from Aardvark to whatever the Z word is at the end of the dictionary. Okay. And then why? And Tamar is right. Is that in her observation that Tekufos and Gematria seem to be more abstract? That's because they are. That Tim is referring to to math and the natural sciences. Okay. So he's using astronomy as an example of that, and then Gematria is an example of the mathematical one. Okay. And then those are okay. Then the question is, what's the relation between the 2 statements? Oh, what we didn't ask? We didn't ask what is the mushal of the desserts or the appetizers. Oh, so that's the thing also. So he is not learning this as desserts. He's learning it as appetizers for chachma, meaning like appetizers that you have to eat the appetizer dish before you eat the main dish. The main dish is the chachma, which is metaphysics. Okay, so that explains the Mishnah. But now the question is, what is the Havamina? Like what would we have thought if we didn't have this statement? And what's the practical application and who's it for? Yeah, Tamar?
I'm getting slightly confused about where the Meiri is putting the Tekufos and Gematria. Is that something you should wait to learn, or something you should learn before you learn other stuff?
I think, hold on a second. I accidentally clicked something. The way I'm reading the Meiri, even though he doesn't talk out everything, I think, actually, I'm going to do this here. Hold on. Meiri. Okay, so the curriculum is first finish Shas. Okay. Second, learn the natural sciences. Okay, and that I think he's taking as Tekufos, and math, or as the British would say, maths. That is Gematrios. He doesn't say like an order of those 2 things. It might just be he's not going into it. And then you can get okay, which are appetizers. Okay, and then last is ha-chachma, i.e. metaphysics. Yeah, so that's what he is saying. I don't know if there, presumably he's would hold that there's also a seder within Shas that you should do and within the natural sciences, but he's just not going into that right now. Does that answer your question, Tamar, or did I misunderstand your question?
Yeah. I wasn't sure if he was putting Tekufos and Gematros and the things that you have to prepare before you learn, but it sounds like no.
Yeah.
Not specifically, maybe somewhat, but like not. That wasn't the point.
Okay. Yeah. Right. So their appetizer, which is preparatory, preparatory. Is that how you spell preparatory? Yeah. Preparatory studies. Yeah. Vanessa?
I think I'm just confused by this order. Why would you start with Shas and then take the curve, I guess, into math and then go into metaphysics? I think I'd understand it if 1 and 2 were swapped and like you look around, like you're growing up, you're a 3-year-old, you're looking around at the world around you and you're like, how does the world work? And then you ask questions and then you brought in Torah. That's what I thought you meant when you like said the appetizer thing. But you're saying Shas comes first. What?
Right. So that's a good question. Why Shas come first? Yeah. Anyone have an answer to that?
Which my initial thought is like, especially if we're like the way that they're talking about Shas, they're saying like from beginning to end, they're saying every little halachot, and like when you're growing up, you're doing little halachot also. So maybe it's like, why do we wash our hands? We wash our hands to be able to serve God. What's God like? That's not the best. There's more staggered ones, but maybe it's like, why do we say the Shema? We say the Shema because like we need to remember that Hashem took us out of Egypt and that Hashem is one. What are those things mean? What do you mean we got like you get to explore more, and then when you have more questions about you see that Mitzrayim, then you go into Tanakh, and then you go delve into more Tanakh, you go into the commentaries, you go into maybe that, but even that feels like a stretch, especially and that doesn't answer the question of why you would pivot into math if you're like going through all of Shas.
Right, I agree. Yeah, Lauren?
Could it be because like presumably like Shas, that's from Hashem, so that's like never changing, that knowledge like that we. I mean, it's kind of like that's like I'm forgetting the word now, but and that's like our Masorah, whereas let's say the natural sciences, like yes, they're based on certain eternal principles and they're describing the natural world, but ultimately they're discovered by humans. So in the sense that
I hear what you're
it's
saying.
possible that it could change. So like what your grounding should be in terms of your education should be Torah, and then use the natural sciences in service of your
I hear
knowledge
that.
of God.
It's more certain and more reliable because it's coming from Hashem and not constantly evolving. Okay. I hear that.
And maybe Vanessa's like explaining like her question, I think, is the Havamina of the mishnah.
Right. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. If your Shas is something that's already written and it does explore your mind, but like when you're exploring math and more like loosey-goosey things and like things that aren't just rooted in true Torah, that leaves more mind for you having to be independent while still being able to remain faithful to Hashem's Torah.
Right. Okay, good. I think
that
that's
makes
good.
sense. Okay, I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, Ayala?
Similar, but I think a little bit of a different point is that maybe like halacha kind of like colors your worldview and like shapes your worldview, and then after that you can go into like the different maths and ways of thinking and develop those.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was thinking along those lines. First of all, I have a very basic answer, which is that Shas is a you have to know halacha, right? So like but I think the reason why, and I know the Meiri is not saying this, but maybe the reason why he's highlighting bird's nests and nida openings is that our obligation is not just to know these things in terms of knowing what to do, because by the time Rabbi Eliezer ben Chisma was saying this, then they didn't bring bird korbanos anymore, and these nida openings are not like something that every Jew needs to know how to keep Shabbos. I don't think every Jew needs to know how to do these obscure things with the nida openings, but we have a mitzvah of Talmud Torah. I think that's what I was going to say, is like we have a mitzvah of Talmud Torah. So like learning all of Torah Sheba'al Peh is something that every Jew who's commanded in Talmud Torah has to do. Natural sciences and math and all those other things, there's a further human development, but it's not mandated in the same way by halacha as the same way as like learning Torah is, I guess it depends on who you ask. And then the last one is the divine science. But I do agree with what Ayala is saying as well. Is it like it grounds you in a framework that is reliable in terms of values and ideas, and especially now, the natural sciences are a dangerous area to go into, you know, like in certain areas. So I don't know exactly in the Meiri's time. Yeah. So what is the Hava Amina? Why do, or who needs this advice? Or why do we need this advice?
The advice of the Mishnah or the Meiri?
Of the Mishnah according to the Meiri. Yeah, Tamar?
Well, I guess it sounds like he's saying, especially with the Rambam, that the person wants to know the Chachma. They want to know like metaphysics. So this is like, but this is the order you have to do it.
Right, exactly. So I think the simplest explanation is just like the Rambam is unanimously in Torah, the knowledge of God is the highest level of knowledge. Okay, and that's the mitzvah Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am Hashem your God. That's my favorite pasuk in Yirmiyahu. You know, Haskell v'yado osi. You know, knowing and comprehending me. So you would think, oh, we should just jump right into that, but no. There's a seder, and if you don't follow that seder, then like the Rambam says, you're going to get messed up really badly. Yeah, Vanessa?
Yeah, I think the Havamina is that you can't just assume that no matter what you learn, it'll bring you closer to God. It can actually, not just that it won't be the most effective way, but that it can actively like be harmful. Like, I think about people who like grow up like not super observant or not understanding of what Judaism is, and they like hear about Kabbalah and they dive deep into that, but they don't really know what Kabbalah is. So it just like brings them down into this weird like kind of avodah zarah thing instead of like actual Torah, and like actually brings them further away than they had been before. So you can't just jump into it, because if you're gonna make logical pitfalls if you're not doing things in the right way.
In that, I believe in that chapter in the Rambam that I read, when it goes through, you know, the 5 reasons why you shouldn't start off with metaphysics. I think the other 4 reasons, I don't know about all of them, but in the other 4 reasons he talks about that also is like you could end up totally messing up your ideas about God, you know, if you don't have the adequate foundation and preparation. Yeah. So I do think that there is another question or problem that is raised. I mean, I think this is a great interpretation of the Mishnah. Like I think it answers all of our questions and it fits the words. Okay, but I think that there's something that disturbs me in light of this. I'm curious if it disturbs anyone else. Anyone disturbed? Yeah, Lauren?
Well, one thing I was thinking about when you were reading about the math, like I was thinking about how the natural sciences really helps us better understand the Torah and Shas. Like I feel like we use mathematical principles or even logical thinking, and that really helps us understand it even better. So I think that's kind of maybe one thing
that is one thing that I think is a great point. I think it is we can't hold Rabbi Eliezer ben Chisma to that, because I think that the science and math that we have is very different from the science and math that he had. Maybe not so much math, but the science definitely is. So I don't really know. That's one of the difficulties that like I encountered when I was preparing this with Isaiah, is like we don't really know. We, meaning other people do, but I don't know what the level of their gematria and their tekufos were back then. So, but in principle, I agree with you. Yeah, Tamar?
I don't know if this is what's bothering you, but I feel like is this like for real? Like literally you have to learn all of Shas before you can learn it?
Okay, so I was gonna say the same thing, but in a different way, which is like, do we do this? Like, I don't think we do this, you know, like, and I know plenty of Chachamim who do learn lots of Torah, but they are also learning science and they're also learning knowledge about God, you know? So the question is like, you know, what happened to this, especially given like the Rambam's dire warnings. And I can think of like 2 possibilities. Okay. Either we are violating this and we're suffering the consequences. Okay. And we're just so far gone that we don't even know it. Or, 3 possibilities. The other possibility is things have changed. Okay. And we no longer need to go through the same process. Okay. So for example, there's a mishnah in chapter 5 that says, ben chamesh lemikra, ben eser lemishnah, ben chamesh esrei letalmud, right? That when you're 5, you start learning chumash. When you're 10, you start learning mishnah. When you're 15, you start learning gemara. And I know that there's some schools nowadays that try to do that still, but like that model ceased to be the norm, you know, a long time ago, you know. And if you look in Hilchos Talmud Torah in chapter 2 and chapter 4, maybe, the Rambam talks about like what the style was of teaching back then and the style of learning, and it's very different than what we do now. So this is something that happens, is like, you know, there is such thing as educational movements, educational fads, you know, different educational styles, things change, and you know, and maybe this curriculum is not relevant anymore. The third possibility, and this is kind of what I suspect, okay, third possibility is that it's like an ace lasos lashem circumstance, that if you try to do this in many circles now, then it just wouldn't succeed, and people would just either, like, people would not learn about God, you know. Or let's take one thing, okay, and I'm not saying this to like degrade them, but there are certain Jewish circles where they only learn Shas, and they don't learn any science, they don't learn any math, they don't learn any like ideas about God, you know, in terms of like real like philosophy about God. And that's what the Rambam criticizes for the people who are like at the king's palace, but they keep going around the gate and they're never seeing the king, you know. I think you can make the argument that like if we told, let's say you have like all these, you know, modern Orthodox Jews now, you know, again, I think about my high school, if a student asks a question about God and I say, well, we can't really learn about that, you need to finish Shas first, it would just turn everyone off, you know. And it might be that like better for us to enter into these areas and risk, you know, having these harmful distortions and missing steps and stuff like that, because the alternative is just we go totally off the derech. That's my speculation. I don't know for sure. Yeah, Vanessa?
I'm wondering if another, and this might not be validly purely a question, is a way of understanding this is like you do each step to your capacity. So like you're like a baby and like you learn Hebrew first. That's like the extent to which you're going to learn Shas. You're not understanding halacha, but like you get a sense of like the words, or like you do your first, you do Netilat Yadayim for the first time, you learn the Shema, you hear your mom say it. That's as much as you can. You learn math as much as like experimenting with different colored sandboxes, exploring the natural world. And as you grow older, you just go through these steps, and like each course brings you to a better understanding of God. Because like I think even like the most rudimentary, like not religious person has some understanding of what God is, like deep down, even if it's super rudimentary and like has a lot of flaws in it. And I think as you perfect yourself and as you go through the shot, like I don't think people, like I'm a girl, like I don't think that like any, like there were any communities where like it's expected for girls to know all of shots, but like we still have a relationship with Hashem. I don't think this was meant to be so literal. I think it's like, you know, like as you go through Tanakh, you learn it the first time, you get a better understanding of God. That brings you more questions about how the world works, and then you apply those, and then you get even more questions. That gives you a better understanding of God, and then like that brings you back to like, you know, we learn the Pasha all the time. We're cyclical people. You got my point. I'm belaboring.
Okay, so I think that's an excellent point, and I'd say the way I would summarize it is these are not all or nothing steps, or like it's not like you have to complete one level to graduate to the next level. Even though that would be ideal, but it's, you know, and this is another application, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. In other words, we all learn a certain amount of math. The reality is most of us are not going to continue to learn math independently after school is over, after we're done with school. So we got we got a bunch of math, and that helped us in certain ways that Charles Van Doren told us, you know, and that's the reality. It's like we've moved on. You know, many yeshiva students learn a certain amount of Gemara, and after they're done with yeshiva and seminary, they don't. That's not a big part of their life anymore. You know, and I think that is a good realistic way. I think it's within my Ace Lasos Lashem answer of like that's the unfortunately the lowly state we are in now. And if we had better education systems, then you know this would work. But I think that's a good answer for us. Yeah, Vanessa.
I'm not even sure if it's that. I think, like, I work with high schoolers a lot, and I don't think personally that I was ever better at math than I was in high school. At the same time, I think I have a better understanding. Like, I'm still able to help them with their homework if they have homework questions, or like asking them metaphysical questions, because I've lived longer and like been applying my, like, even if I'm not doing math, I'm still thinking, and I've still developed those skills. And have honed my mind in a way that like I'm still able to think in certain ways and be able to answer those questions.
Yeah.
I think that's the same thing. I don't think it's like a sad thing. I think over time you're just gonna, like, you graduate school because you've attained those skills, allegedly. Like, right? Like, I went to public school. I don't know how much we are applying this to like Torah, but
yeah, no, I agree with you, and I do think that like all skills of the mind, then these things do continue to grow and evolve, and in certain ways, even if you're not actively learning it. Okay, so in the interest of time, sorry. So there's one takeaway though that I think that we can get, even if we don't apply this directly, which is, as Rabbi Moskowitz always says, don't skip steps. Okay, like the Rambam's fundamental thing about the guy who you wake up in the middle of the night, the fundamental message of that is, if there is a seder that the experts say is required, don't skip the steps and think that you're going to get the end. Okay, and I think that is something that the chassid needs to hear, because the chassid who is, on a high level and wants to have knowledge of God does need to make sure that he's doing all these steps. So for example, I can picture, I just said it, I can picture many people. Let's say you have a Haredi person who has a rigorous yeshiva education and he learns all of Shas, and then he wants to learn about God. And you say, hold on, fellow, you got to learn science, So if he consulted the Masorah, he would see that, yeah, I have to learn science, or let's say you have someone who is, who thinks that they can get all of the training that they need to learn about God just through the liberal arts curriculum, which is just going to be with its kufos and gematrios, but they don't think they need Shas, so that's going to be missing a fundamental thing. So the main thing is don't skip steps. A fuller analysis of this, we would have to analyze what exactly are you lacking if you are skipping either of these steps, but I don't think we have time for that tonight. Okay, I do want to end at 9:30. So what I want to do is I want to try to truncate the last of the Mefarshim we're going to do, which is the Spforno. Spforno bases his commentary on a Gemara. And the Gemara is in Shabbos Daf Ayin He Amud Aleph, which says, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Mishum Bar Kapara. Kol hayodea l'chashev tkufos umazalos ve'eno choshev. Anyone who knows how to calculate the astronomical seasons and the movement of the constellations, and he doesn't calculate it, Allah hakasav omer, regarding him, the pasuk says, Vespol Hashem lo yabitu u'masiyadav lo ra'u. They do not take notice of the work of Hashem. They do not see his handiwork. And then it says, Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Minay mitzvah al adam l'chashev tkufos umazalos. Where do you know that it is a mitzvah upon a person to calculate the astronomical cycles and the constellations? Shnemar, as it says in Dvarim 4:6, Ushmartem vasisim kihi chochmaschem ubinaschem le'enei ha'amim. You shall guard them and do them, for they are your wisdom and your understanding in the eyes of the people. Ezo chachma ubina shehi le'enei ha'amim. What is the wisdom and understanding in the eyes of the people, of the nations? Haviomer. That is the calculation of the astronomical seasons and constellations. Okay, so Spforno, going on that, says as follows. Our sages, in the Gemara we just read, said by way of explanation of that which is stated, for it is your wisdom and your understanding in the eyes of the nations. Which is a wisdom that is in the eyes of the nations? This is the calculation of astronomical cycles and calculations. Okay, now, then he goes and he does something which we don't usually see people do. He gives a biographical snapshot of who Rabbi Eliezer ben Chisma is. This is the wise man, meaning the Tana, about whom it was said that he knew how to estimate the number of drops in the sea. Okay, so this is like, I feel like there's a category of like mathematical feats that various mathematicians have done, like in the ancient world, of like, I can calculate the size of the earth, and they're like, oh, that's impossible. And then it turns out that they actually like did a pretty good job. Or I can calculate, like Rambam has a thing of like, yeah, I can calculate like the distance to the moon, and like he got it pretty right, so that's what he did with the drops in the sea. Okay. Due to his great wisdom in mathematics, he extolled the virtue of the wisdom of astronomy, through which one can attain knowledge of the positions of the stars and their movements. However, he said that the calculations in the tractate Kinim and the calculations of Nida offerings, which are difficult to grasp, are nevertheless principal laws. Now, the footnote guy, Rabbi Moshe Kravitz, says in his footnote, which I translated, in other words, in these laws, the calculation is the halacha itself. And once a person learns the calculation, he will know the halacha. So that's doing with all these cases of like, mixing up the bird's nests and stuff. There are complex calculations, and once you know the calculation, you'll know what the halacha actually is. Okay. However, he says, yeah, Tamar?
Wait, so just to clarify, he's saying these are actually like halachos with a calculation element? Is that?
Yes. Yeah.
These?
Yeah, with the kinim and the nida openings. Yeah. Okay. However, calculations of the astronomical cycles, as well as the discipline called geometry, so he learns gematria as geometry, not numerical values of letters, are merely the parperis to the wisdom of astronomy. Now, here's what confused me a lot when I read this. It seems to be that he's saying that there are two aspects of astronomy. Okay, there's the calculation part, the mathematical part, and then there's the proper study of astronomy, which is the real chachma. And I think what he's doing, even though he doesn't say this, I think in the same way that the Meiri said la chachma is the wisdom of metaphysics, I think Sphere saying la chachma is the wisdom of appreciating the heavenly bodies that Hashem created. So as opposed to the Tekufos, which is calculating doing the mathematics of calculating the motion. I think that's also why he talks about geometry, which has to do with numbers in space. Okay, so he says, however, calculations of the astronomical cycles, as well as the discipline called geometry, are merely parperis to the wisdom of astronomy. Footnote. In other words, these calculations are not wisdom itself, but are merely an introduction to the learning of the wisdom, which is more important. For this reason, we must say that parperis refers to that which comes at the beginning of the meal to awaken the appetite, so appetizers. Okay. In light of this, consider the superiority of the wisdom of astronomy, being that these distinguished branches of wisdom are like seasonings to it. Sorry, not seasonings, appetizers to it. With this, he called attention to every listener to increase his striving to attain this wisdom of astronomy. So the footnote says, the Tana came to extol the importance of learning the subject, in which the pasuk says is the wisdom of Israel in the eyes of the nations. For the wisdom of I think Tchuna is like calculation astronomy, and geometry are only introductions to this wisdom. So what is he saying? So he's saying, look, I'm a guy who likes math. Okay, I can calculate the number of drops in the sea. Okay, however, you can't lump all math into one category. Okay, there are two categories of math here in halacha. Okay, there are the calculations that constitute halacha themselves, like the kinim and the Pirkei Nida, where you need to know them because that's the only way to know what the halacha is. Okay, then there's the calculation dimension of the astronomical calculations and the gematrios, geometry, which are also complicated, but they aren't halacha. Rather, they are preparation for the real chachma, which is astronomy. Okay, and what he's really urging people to do is to learn astronomy. And I think Sforno is emphasizing that like this was a math guy because he's saying I don't know. I mean, I don't know how many times you've heard people say this, but like there are definitely people who are like experts in their field, and then they say that their field is just like a stepping stone to some greater field that they're not expert in. You're like, whoa, like this guy says that about that field, Yeah, Vanessa.
I don't understand why he cares about astronomy at the end, like the wisdom of astronomy. Like, what does that signify?
Yeah, so I don't know what the Sphere says. I think I could find it in his writings if I looked, but I don't know where to find it. So I found something else. This is from one of the Bali Tosfos on the Gemara in that we just read. So this is Rav Yonatan Mluniel, 1135 to 1210. I didn't know who he was. So he says this is why you should learn astronomy. He says, Lefi shihi chachma mefaora. It's a glorious chachma. Umakir gedulas kono. Shetiknam kiritzono. You can recognize the greatness of your creator who set up these things, these heavenly bodies, according to his will. And they cannot change that which is decreed upon them, right? Like that's what we say in the bracha of Kirsh Levana, like he set their patterns in motion, and like there's nothing that they could do to deviate. They have no power, right? We don't believe in astrology. Ela kiratana boret. All they do is they do the will of God. Shadan bedin briosav kechavso. God establishes the laws on his creations according to his will. V'yakir taos hamishtachvim l'shemesh l'yireach shetoim v'omrim shemirim u'metivim. And the more you study astronomy, the more you realize the error of the idolaters who bow down to the sun and the moon and the stars, and that they err and think that these things benefit you or harm you. And you'll know how to refute a heretic and a magi. Okay, so I would add to that, though, that the Rambam says that your avas Hashem, your love of God, comes from beholding the heavens and seeing the chachma in the universe. So I mean, I think you could go on a lot about why astronomy is one of the greatest chachmos, but at the end of the day, it just, you see the wisdom of God in it to a different degree than you do in other areas of science. And the Radak says that that's what Mizmor Shir Le'om HaShabbos is about, is ma amku machrosecha kulam b'chach. I can never quote stuff out of context. You know what Mizmor Shir Le'om HaShabbos says. How deep are your thoughts? And that's talking about study of astronomy.
Okay, I just needed to hear that it was connected to understanding God. That just was not.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I was waiting for him to say it, and then he just wasn't, and I was like,
well, here's the thing.
Are you saying it's science for science sake?
Sforno is not saying that. He is saying that I don't know why he emphasizes that it's the wisdom in your understanding in the eyes of the nations. I'd have to see what I actually should have looked at what he says on that pasuk. Now, we're almost out of time. I want to end with something odd. Okay. So I have a really good friend, Yehuda Issaroff, who I don't know when, a couple years ago, got very involved in studying halakhic astronomy. Okay, and so involved that he's given he gives shiur on them, and he has an Armillary sphere, which is this device that you use to measure the heavenly motions. So I asked him. I said, "Do you have?" Actually, I did two things. Okay, I asked Rabbi Fader, I said, "Do you have a shot on this mishnah in terms of the gematria thing?" And he said he has some thoughts, but he didn't get a chance to share it with me, so I'm still waiting for that. And then and I asked Yehuda what he thinks about this the Tekufos thing, about the astronomical calculations. I want to play for you, assuming you can hear it, what he says. It's like a 3-minute message, and we'll conclude with that. First of all, tell me, can you hear this?
So here's my my brief thoughts on the topic.
Yep.
The mishnah in Pirkei Avos. I think you can go your entire life as a Talmud Chacham and really know less, almost nothing about astronomy, and still be a Talmud Chacham. But it's the dessert, because you can have an entire meal and not have dessert and still have a great meal. Dessert is not necessarily essential to a good meal, but can be very delicious and sometimes can be the best part of the meal. And for me, I went 34 years not ever really questioning the path of the sun, really not knowing anything about it. Even as simple as question, even just a realization of that the sun sets. It doesn't always set directly east and west every day, but it varies by season. And then in the summer it rises close to the north, and in the winter it rises closer to the south of straight east, of due east. And then the same way that it sets is also due north in the summer and due south in the winter. On the west side, I never knew that. I never really thought about that. I didn't realize that it doesn't go directly above our heads in the middle of the day. I didn't know any of these things. But not only did I not know that, but I never even thought that would have an impact on our understanding of halacha. And I think maybe that's what the mishnah is alluding to, is that you can really go, your whole life just kind of going with the flow of what your community holds in Zmanim and not really understand the connection to astronomy. But once you unlock that door and you step in, you realize it's this entire world, I wouldn't say world, but universe of Chachma that you never realized was there. And the fact that it is baked into the halachic system only makes it more beautiful, because you're literally engaging with these realities every single day, multiple times a day, indirectly or directly. So yeah, that's kind of my brief off the cuff thoughts. So hopefully that's helped. But I think it's similar into gematria a little bit. I read Rabbi Feder's gematria book, and I think he's doing a similar thing. You can really go for a long time without thinking there's any significance to gematria. But once you unlock that, that approach, I think that it allows you to realize a chachma that's there. But for my personal experience is that it is more profound with tekufos and astronomy. But that's just me.
So the main reason I wanted to play it for you is because I think that's the sound of someone who really is enjoying his dessert. And the book that he recommends is called The Great Zmanim Debate, which I've not read, but apparently it really goes into this stuff a lot. So if you're interested in tekufos, then you should get that. And if you're interested in gematrios, you should get Rabbi Feder's book. And if you are interested in gematrios meaning math, not meaning like numerical value of letters, then I'm sure we have at least one mathematician who can recommend some books for math. But that is it for tonight, I think. There's a lot more here, but I think that'll be good for now. And I mentioned this at the beginning of shiur, but not everyone was here. I'll keep the recording. Is next week I'm going to Connecticut, God willing. So no Friday shiur, and I think we need to take a vote on whether we're going to have Thursday night shiur during Chanukah, because I feel like people have Chanukah parties and Chanukah dinners and Chanukah activities, and I really don't want to pour in all the energy that I have to prepare the shiur if it's not going to be like a turnout, that we usually have. So we'll put it to a vote, and we'll make a decision for each of those next 2 weeks. But this is good. And hopefully you got something from this, even though it's a very weird mishnah in Pirkei Avos.
Thank you.
Really good. Thank you.
All right, good. All right, have a good night, everyone, and preemptive happy Chanukah.
Thank you.
All right.
You too.